see Bob is on the left, knocked out Dave Shields in round 8 before he drew into the top 8. And one thing you should know is the sneak and show player, George Magou on the right, he's taken a 5-card hand this time. So you said this might be tough for Bob because he was on the draw. He's going to have an opportunity here.
Absolutely. Those sneak and show is one of the decks of the format that are most robust at doing things like mulligan to 5. It's not a critical mass deck. It's not elves. It's not storm. It's just lick and stick 2 cards together, and you can do that on 5 cards. Not as easily as 7, but still not that challenging.
Yeah, we're underway. George on his first turn just had a basic island. Bob had the same thing. His made a Delver of Secrets. So he's going to have a clock on the board. We'll see how fast George can get his combo online. We see at least 1 Lotus Petal accompanying his second land there. And it will be a Brainstorm from George's side.
Very curious to see the land played first. I understand that he's playing around days to some extent, but it turns the Brainstorm into something fairly anemic if he can't shuffle his deck this turn. And so by not having a shuffler face up, Bob knows he doesn't really have to fight over this Brainstorm. And this is not much more than draw a card.
It's true. He can't play a fetch land to shuffle. George is going to actually get both the cards he put back. He's going to pay 2 life for this Jataxian Probe, and we'll get to see the hand that Bob is sitting on.
Yep.
Yeah, this does mean that the Brainstorm was just cycled, however. Taking a look at what Bob has, he has a Jataxian Probe of his own, a Force of Will, a Young Pyromancer, a second Delver, and 2 fetch lands. Overall, a pretty good standing on Bob's side.
Pretty potent hand, and this is exactly the kind of hand that can withstand 1 hit from Emrakul.
Yeah, he'll be able to play a turn 2 Young Pyromancer and Jataxian Probe after it if he wants, while still leaving up Force of Will. We see George after the probe. He's going to go ahead and ponder.
So this sort of allows him to assemble his own shuffle if he was trying to bury 1 bad card.
Yeah, he did get to put 2 cards back, draw 1 of them, and now ponder. It does mean that if he keeps a card off this ponder and that card is not a fetch land, that he's really just cast 1 blue, draw a card twice.
Which is still not the end of the world, but not as potent as these cards generally are.
Yeah, and that is what he's going to do. You see his hand, he has a Preordain, Lotus Petal, and I believe 1 of his monsters. And upkeep, the Delver of Secrets does not flip, so it's going to remain a 1/1 for this turn. We're over to Bob. How much pressure can he get on the board, and how fast can he put it there?
Well, he does get a pretty nice turn here where he gets to potentially cast his own Pyromancer, cast the Jataxian Probe, and start to get going here a little bit.
Looks like we're going to see just that. A fetch land for Volcanic Island will make Young Pyromancer for Huang. And I imagine after presenting, he will do that Jataxian Probe you mentioned, so he can see just how much time he has. And we get to see Magoo's hand. It is a Gristlebrand, a Petal, a Preordain, and a Pierce.
Not the worst hand given the circumstances here for George. He has he has 1 of the pieces of the combo and a counterspell and some more mana and a cantrip, which given the circumstances is about as good of a hand as he can ask for.
Yeah, if he can find a land and a show and tell, he will have a protected combo on turn 4, and that may be enough to get by Bob Huang. Go back to Bob's turn. He's going to start with a Preordain. How many of these pieces can he find? Looks like another Lotus Petal. Can't imagine he's going to keep that one. So we see a top and a bottom. One of the cards gets him closer to the solution, and it looks like that's going to be a Scalding Tarn.
And just making a normal land drop is not bad for George here.
No, I mean, he'd want to play a show and tell, and he does know that he's going to have to spell pierce the Force of Will in Bob's hand when he does so. So he's going to need 4 land for the combo.
Yeah. Still going to be very challenging for George to get this all off in time.
He just needs to top deck a show and tell, but still has to do that one. And he'll go with another Brainstorm here. Played Lotus Petals that he could pay for days if he needed to. And he does have a fetch land up, so he can reset after this Brainstorm.
The biggest issue here is that it's not clear that Spell Pierce is going to provide any resistance the turn he does go off if Bob simply untaps, keeps up some mana for the rest of the game, and rides the threats he currently has.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. Bob doesn't actually need to cast anything else on his own turn. He does have, right now, 4 power in play. That'll very quickly turn into 6 power. It's probably a 3-turn clock on Bob's side.
Very hard for him to get it to 2, and very hard for it to go to 4 or beyond, so.
Right, so he can just ride out the course of these creatures, really focus on disrupting George's combo, and then 3 turns later take in the game. But some things could go wrong in the meantime. We'll see what George can do here. Resolving this Brainstorm, currently has 5. He gets to put 2 back, but a clean shuffle will give him more chances to find the pieces he needs. You do see he has another Brainstorm in his hand. So post-shuffle, he'll get a lot more looks. And he has Gitaxian Probe, Brainstorm, and it looks like Gristlebrand as the remaining 3.
And Ponder may be the ideal card here, as Bob already has a 3rd land drop in place, so he can Ponder, improve his hand even further if he wants to, trigger the Young Pyromancer again, still keep up 2 mana to protect his Force of Will from a Spell Pierce.
We'll go back to Bob. Yeah, as you said, more lands and a Ponder. He'll start on Ponder. That makes an elemental token. Delver of Secrets did flip there, so this is definitely a turn 2 clock. If he stretches, Bob could make, sorry, it's a 3-turn clock. If he stretches, Bob could maybe get it to 2.
Well, he's going to be attacking for 6 this turn, which is down to 11. He has just found a Lightning Bolt, which can knock George to 8 and trigger the Young Pyromancer again, and then untap with 8 points of power in play.
I was going to say, if he finds the Lightning Bolt, it will be a 2-turn clock. So here's the swing. It's for 6, and George is down to 11. Let's not forget the fact that George is probably planning to crack this fetch land if at all possible. And Bob will play another Delver here. That does take him out of Spell Pierce range, and I don't think it increases his clock. So there's an opening for George at the moment.
This is a little bit risky on Bob's part, but George still needs a pretty incredible hand to push through.
Yeah, Force of Will was the draw for George. So maybe Spell Pierce is no longer the card, and if George knows that, we'll see him act accordingly. He's going to Brainstorm here. And if your George is maybe a little slow, he knows the top card of his deck is no good, and it looks like he's brainstorming to set up for next turn, but as we know, there isn't really a next turn.
Yeah.
Bob is contemplating forcing this Brainstorm, and I can't imagine he'll end up making that play. It seems like that's a lot of untapped mana that George has.
Exactly.
But we will see here. Spells on the stack. Bob's hand is Force of Will, blue card, and Lightning Bolt.
If you're contemplating Force of Willing here, it means you believe that George's hand as currently constructed is a mess, but that it could become a winner with the perfect 2 or 3 cards.
Yeah, I don't think it's unreasonable to think that George has a mess here. The question is do you need to allow him to resolve this and to counter it anyway? So it is going to be a Force of Will from Bob, also a Force of Will from George back to get the Brainstorm to resolve. And this turns out to be a pretty good turn of events for Bob, actually, because now that George's counter spells are gone, Bob really has free reign to just fetch, bolt, and attack the next turn.
Yeah.
Post Brainstorm, Bob's going to go ahead and shuffle. He has 2 cards here. If they are a Show and Tell and a monster, he will be able to put together his combo right now.
I think on the way back, the top card of Bob's deck is a Lightning Bolt. So if he attacks with everything, flips his Delver, attacks with everything, and bolts the creature that Gristlebrand blocks, then there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 coming across. So George would survive, but is still in a ton of trouble. And he doesn't even have a hand that good. So
yeah, he had the Gristlebrand. His second card was a Ponder. Looked at the top 3, didn't see help. Realized even if he finds a Show and Tell, he doesn't have enough mana for it anyway. And he'll let game 1 go over to Bob here.
You can tell the way that game was shaping up, though. You can see that Gristlebrand is not always reliable in this matchup. Bob's able to generate a lot of extra permanence because of Young Pyromancer. Gristlebrand is really the threat that George wants most of the time.
All right, well, we're going to bring you back into the booth for a second here. Thank you for joining us. You're watching currently our top 8 match between Bob Huang and George Magou. This is the top 8 of the Star City Games Legacy Open from New Jersey. But we're going to take a break to ask a trivia question here. And if for those of you who are following us on Twitter, if you believe you know the answer, go ahead and tweet it at us with the hashtag SCGPremium. At the end of all 4 of our top 8 matches, we will select one of the correct answers to get 3 months of Star City Games. You have a question? Take it away.
Well, all of our questions so far have been pertaining to Grand Prix Orlando, which is right around the corner next weekend. question I have for you is, we always bring in guest artists for all of our events. Name any of the guest artists that will be appearing in Orlando. Again, tweet your answer at SCG Live, hashtag SCG Premium.
Remember, you can always find out more about that event at MagicGP.com. So going back to our match, want to go ahead and look at the sideboard, especially with these Delver tempo-ish style strategies. You can have a lot of options in the sideboard. I'm curious what Bob has available to him.
He has 3 copies of Grimlob, 2 copies of Grimlob Mancer, 3 Pyroblast, 2 Sulfuric Vortex, 2 Blood Moon, 2 Gravedigger's Cage, 2 Pithy Needle, a Smash the Smithereens, and a Null Rod. The 3 Pyroblasts fit in very naturally here. A lot of blue cantrips in George decks, counter spells and so forth. The 2 Pithy Needles can name either Sneak Attack or Gristlebrand. Naming Gristlebrand is not the best, but it still can be a thing from time to time. The rest of the sideboard, not a ton going on.
Yeah, some of the things you mentioned here, Sulfuric Vortex, not Blood Moon, these aren't really cards for this matchup, but the Red Blasts should be great against both George's counterspells and his show and tells, as you mentioned. And Pithing Needle is interesting to me. It's a little bit of a take it or leave it. Seems like needling Gristlebrand isn't really where he wants to be. Needling Sneak Attack, that seems fine.
Yeah, the primary function is to get Sneak Attack. There's some weird situations where Gristlebrand can be named. It's not what you're looking to do, but being able to shut down Sneak Attack is definitely excellent.
All right, on George Magoo's side, look at some of the cards he has available to him. Some of them aren't very useful here, Blood Moon, Gravedigger's Cage, but something I'm very excited about is 3 copies of Pyroclasm in his sideboard, especially after seeing a deck cast Delver of Secrets and Young Pyromancer to take away a game. A card like Pyroclasm that will sweep up every creature in Bob's deck.
Well, not necessarily. Certainly Delver of Secrets, Young Pyromancer, all the tokens, they're all gone. But Monastery Swift Spear, if Bob has Pyroclasm on his radar and can leave up an instant, can play over the top of it. So it is still the best card George is bringing to the table post-board. But Bob's creature base is a little bit more durable than a Blue-Red Delver deck that's, say, bringing, let's say, Goblin Guy to the table, which we sometimes see out of these strategies.
Yeah, that actually is interesting. Remember, we're in top 8 here, which means players get access to their opponent's deck list. And that does mean that Bob will know about the Pyroclasms and probably makes it a lot more likely that he's going to play around them, as you mentioned.
To the extent that he can. It's a high opportunity cost, leaving up instants some percentage of the time, but it is something that Bob is aware of. Not that it's uncommon for a Sneak and Show to have Pyroclasm in the sideboard, but still. Good to have the information, and Bob can do some amount to work against Pyroclasm.
Now, I'm curious about your thoughts on a couple cards here. He has a Swan Song, actually a second 2 Swan Songs, a Flusterstorm, and an Echoing Truth. All of them have some applications against Blue-Red Delver. Echoing Truth can take Young Pyromancer tokens out. Swan Song can help push through a counter war. How much does he want to do this, and how much is that really just getting him away from the focus of his deck?
I like the Flusterstorm because it can be used to push through the combo or kind of in normal games. I don't generally like Echoing Truth, though. Against a deck with Young Pyromancer, there's more of an argument for it. I think that Swan Song is okay, though it can really only be used to push through the combo. Using it early on in the game is pretty rough because a 2/2 flying token, the 2-power token that the Swan Song generates, that's facilitating Bob's clock. So
yeah, Bob's definitely a deck that can utilize a 2/2. But you're right, Flusterstorm could just be used on anything, even as innocuous as, say, a turn 1 Ponder of Bob's, whereas Swan Song is just for counter wars.
Exactly. It can be used when George is making his push or when Bob is making a fairly innocent play. The same thing is not true of Swan Song, can pretty much only be used for the big push.
We are underway, looks like, with game 2. George will be on the play again. Last time he had to mulligan to 5 cards on the play, which did give an opportunity for Bob to steal the game on the draw. We'll see if he can get it this time. Both players on 7. George will lead the game on a Ponder. And as he resolves this, we'll get some updates from other parts of our bracket. This is the 1-8 match between Steve Guillerme and Steven Mann. Steve Guillerme and his Miracles deck takes game 1. Those players are moving to game 2. Remember, we will give you coverage of that as soon as this match is finished. And on Bob's side, he had a turn 1 Volcanic Island with no play, which seems a little surprising for his deck, considering that almost the entire deck's at 1 mana.
Well, he did keep a hand with Daze and Brainstorm, so he had something to do. Just didn't want to Brainstorm on his main phase and then decided to Pyroblast this Brainstorm instead.
Well played here. Bob's going to go with a second Volcanic Island, a Young Pyromancer, and we'll see if he fires off a Jataxian Probe here. Looks like he's going to, and we see Magoo's hand. It is a 3rd land, a Gristlebrand, and 2 Force of Wills.
And Bob getting paid off for having Pyroblasted that Brainstorm because George's hand needs serious help.
Well, it is just a top-decked show
Yeah,
and
it is
tell
true.
away from being a turn 3, but you're absolutely right. Until he finds that card, he is really playing off the top of his deck. Card drawn from George. It's a Ponder. That's pretty good right now.
Not a bad top deck.
See what he goes for here. He is looking for show and tell. His top 3 cards here are Lotus Petal, Flusterstorm, and Sneak Attack. I'd have to think he's going to keep these guys.
They all seem valuable. Flusterstorm can be used to push with the sneak attack. He needs some extra mana anyway. Seems like a nice top 3.
Not that it's not without some weakness, because he only has a 3rd land in his hand, and that Lotus Petal is number 4 for sneak attack. The Flusterstorm is no good here because he won't have mana to cast it. And actually, that's enough of a reason that George is going to shuffle that away despite finding part of his the other half of his combo.
If George, calculates all the information and decides that the sneak attack is not a path given the other 2 cards, then he kind of has to get rid of everything because the other 2 cards are predicated on the sneak attack being good.
Yeah, it does mean he's basically on show and tell or bust here. I'm not saying I disagree with it, but it certainly is an aggressive Ponder.
For sure. But I like it because people don't shuffle enough.
Definitely agree with that sentiment. We'll go back over to Bob. Starts the turn with 3 power on the board. He's going to get his clock going. Like to see how fast he can do it. 3rd land is Polluted Delta. He'll start with a Brainstorm. Here's a 4th elemental. And you see young Pyromancer get out of control really fast in a lot of these Delver decks.
And Bob has found the star of the weekend, the Monastery Swift Spear.
Yes, he's found Monastery Swift Spear. He also has Lightning Bolt, Daze, Brainstorm. A lot of good instance for the young Pyromancer, in addition to this 1/2 haster that can grow. A lot of cards at Bob's disposal right now.
And with the Daze and the Brainstorm has a lot of ability to protect this Monastery Swift Spear from a Pyroclasm.
Yeah, Delver of Secret's also in his hand. I'll be interested to see just how much Bob wants to commit to this board. He's got to have Pyroclasm on his radar. Right now, he's pretty far ahead, and he'd really hate to lose to a card like that.
For sure. It's really the one thing besides George comboing off that Bob has to concern himself with.
All right, fetches off his 3rd land after that cantrip. So now it has 2 up, and it looks like it's going to be Monastery Swift Spear. It's the play for the turn. And he may just main phase Lightning Bolt before the attack. It would be a Lightning Bolt for 4 thanks to Monastery Swift Spear's damage.
Or he can Brainstorm. Either, if he's looking for some improvement.
He'll go for Delver of Secrets. So this is all the creatures in. Does mean that Swift Spear, Pyromancer, and 1 token can swing in. That's 4 damage. Puts Magoo down to 16. It's pretty aggressive here, but thanks to Daze, he could still save his Swift Spear in the event of a Pyroclasm.
Yes. And he has the opportunity next turn to Brainstorm, set the Delver down, Bolt again. That's 2 triggers of Prowess.
Say it was not. That was the opportunity there too for George to get the combo, but the combo he does not have. Draws a card, finds a Spell Pierce, I believe. Just has to pass back the turn, and things are going to get ugly real quick.
This looks like not this turn, but certainly next.
Yeah, upkeep Brainstorm for Bob. Puts another elemental into play. Makes Monastery Swift Spear a 2/3. Right now, you have to assume that first of all, the Delver will flip. The Delver will be 3 damage. The Swift Spear and the Young Pyromancer will be at least 4. Tokens make it 9. It's going to be 9 plus whatever instance Bob plays. Unlikely to be 16, but going to be a healthy chunk of damage.
Yeah, and the attack will unlikely be lethal this turn. Basically impossible, but next turn is a kill.
There we go, Lightning Bolt's the draw. It flips the Delver into Insectile Aberration. A Scalding Tarn from Bob, and we are going to be off to the attacks here.
Now, Bob may want to save the Bolt in his hand. I guess, yeah, it doesn't really add anything to the clock this turn. He gives up 1 point of damage potentially and gives some insurance against a Pyroclasm, so no reason to Bolt main phase. Can just untap into it next turn if he's feeling so inclined.
And here is the swing. It's going to be for 7, 8, 9 damage. George goes down to 6 off this fetch for a Volcanic Island.
The other nice thing about keeping the Bolt in hand is it doesn't even matter if Using the timer quick tie. I like it. Even if George is able to get Gristlebrand into play, it doesn't matter. He can't activate it this turn, and Bob can attack, bolt whichever creature Gristlebrand blocks, and still be pushing across lethal.
And this is the last chance for George to get the combo together. Does he hit it? It's a Brainstorm. We don't know yet. This will be Brainstorm here. There is a Daze in Huang's hand. You have to watch out for that one. Can George find... It's going to have to be Show and Tell plus some protection from Daze. So he's going to put back 2 cards. Here's a fetch land.
The problem is I don't even think the combo is good here.
Yeah, and it's not good enough. He doesn't have it either. George Magou extends the hand, shows what he was sitting on, said he never found the second half of the combo, and as a result was just attacked to death twice in a row. Bob Huang, 2-0 will defeat George Magou.
George's draws were atrocious those 2 games, but Bob did execute a very nice blue-red Delver plan, got some pressure on the table, backed up by some counters and some burn, was able to finish off the game pretty quickly before George could cobble together the combo pieces he needed.
All right, so with that match finished, Bob will move on to the top 4. His opponent remains to be seen. It's going to be a match between Steven Mann and Steve Guillerme.